All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining our American Marketing Association Southern Connecticut chapter event. Tonight's event topic is Learn How to Translate Data into True Business Intelligence. My name is Richard Connor, and I have the privilege of being the chapter president this board year. And I'm really excited to host this event and have all of you participate with us. So just a little bit about the American Marketing Association. We are a national association with about 70 chapters throughout the United States. American Marketing Association Southern Connecticut is one of the chapters, one of the 70 chapters, and we serve as your local resource for marketing events such as this one, and hopefully in the near future we'll be back to in-person events as well as networking opportunities. So again, very excited to have you here in this virtual world, but there are many other ways for you to engage with us. So please, visit our website and also follow us on social media as we have much marketing information and resources to share with you. So just a little bit, flipping back and forth here. So just a little bit more about AMA. AMA National offers a membership, as you may be aware of. The membership is quite reasonable in price. It's about $149 a year. With that membership, you get access to many marketing resources that the national organization provides. So if you're interested, please feel free to check that out. We have a membership representative on our board. Her name is Jill Arvanitis. So if you have questions about becoming a member or what are the benefits of becoming a member, I would encourage you to please feel free and contact Jill. As far as the event and our sponsors tonight, we have sponsors that we would like to first thank for their generosity and support. Without them, we wouldn't be able to put on events like this as well as our in-person events. So first we have Media Associates, which is a strategic media planning, buying and analytics agency located in Sandy Hook, Connecticut. Next, we have Sacred Heart University's Jack Welch College of Business and Technology. They are located in Fairfield, Connecticut on Sacred Heart's spacious West Campus. The Jack Welch College of Business and Technology houses an array of state-of-the-art business labs and classrooms that are fully technologically enabled, supporting 9 graduate degree programs, including master's and certificate programs in digital marketing, business analytics, and business administration. Next is Austin Lawrence Group. They are a growth marketing agency that offers strategy and consulting to production and training services for B2B firms located in Norwalk, Connecticut. And last but not least is Alpha Graphics, a marketing service provider with full service printing. So with that, we'd like to get into tonight's session. So I'm very pleased to introduce our moderator tonight, Ben Coons, who is EVP of Strategy at Media Associates, as well as VP of Programming for our Southern Connecticut Chapter Board. So Ben, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Everyone, welcome aboard. Super excited to have you here. It's been a great year, and we're concluding our 2021 series with a very cool panel on business intelligence. And before I introduce our panelists and get into it, I thought I'd lead with a quick story. Business intelligence is a bit of a buzzword. It's about a $20 billion market in the US, expected to double in the next 7 years. But what it really is like law, like marketing, is a huge field with many applications. One of the most famous stories, though, about business intelligence, which kind of exemplifies the opportunity and the risk, came out of 2002. There was an analyst named Andrew Pohl. He was a statistician who was hired by Target, and he had an insight. The challenge Target had was a lot of people would go to shopping at Target for a few things to catch up on their laundry or buy the occasional piece of home furniture. But Target sells everything, and they were trying to really capture a wider share of wallet among their consumers. And what Target realized with research is that something like 45% of all of our decisions, you, me, everyone, in terms of purchases, comes out of habit. We tend to steer intuitively to the same gas station. We go to the same grocery store. We're just on autopilot. But there are moments in life when we break those habits. And their insight was when people are married, when they move, when they have their first baby, that's when people make a radical shift sometimes in breaking their routines. So Andrew Pohl, back to our statistician, he dug through the data, and lo and behold, he was able to track consumers who bought diapers for the first time or baby supplies for the first time. And then he went back in their buying purchases. And he realized that before the baby was born, when the woman was pregnant, there were about 25 products, unscented hand lotion or cotton swabs, kind of obscure products that women tended to buy when they were pregnant. So he did a data crunching. He built a list of women who looked like they were going to have a baby in the next 6 or 8 months. And he helped Target do a direct mail campaign. So the punchline of the story was a father in Minneapolis went into a Target irate that his 15-year-old girl had received a coupon in the mail for baby maternity supplies and beat up the manager verbally. He went home. He called 2 days later to apologize. He talked to his daughter and found out that his 15-year-old daughter was actually pregnant. So Target was able to ascertain via data a very personal thing about this family and their situation. So that is interesting, I think, because it shows the pros and cons and the risks of how you use business intelligence to guide business growth. So using that as kind of a kickoff story, let's dive into it. I want to introduce you to 3 amazing panelists we have today. So we have Patti McCabe, formerly with IBM, who is a computer science guru from Pace University, spent many, many years with IBM. She's currently seeking a business analyst role, and Patti, it's great to have you aboard. We have Professor Khawaja Mamun, Sacred Heart University professor of business analytics, who is really teaching the future generations about how to use business intelligence. And last but not least, we have Rick Muldowney, who is vice president of advanced analytics for Havas Health. So welcome our panelists. We're excited to have you today. And I think what I want to do is kick off. I'm going to turn it to Rick first. Let's talk a little bit about the definition of business intelligence. You know, how does it answer questions for business? How does data become intelligence in business?
Sure. Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Richard, for kicking us off this evening. Having been in marketing analytics for a number of decades, when I hear business intelligence, what I think about is areas of reporting, areas of dashboard development. So think of key performance indicators for a business. Tonight's panel talks about translating information into business intelligence. And I found it interesting, if you looked at the Eventbrite picture, it shows a woman in front of what looks to be dashboards, line charts, bar charts, pie charts. That is business intelligence to me. And in a business, that's how people would speak to it. So how do those things get delivered? But I think there's a bigger area that covers analytics and covers areas of machine learning and covers artificial intelligence. And for example, Ben's example this evening is exactly what falls into machine learning. So yes, it's connecting data to marketing and data to marketing to decisions. But as a purist in me, when I hear business intelligence, I think of, from a marketing aspect into business, reporting, dashboards, and those kind of things. I think as we get through this, that might blur a little bit, but I just wanted to put that out to folks from that perspective.
And Patti, how would you expand the definition of business intelligence?
Thanks, Ben. Building on what Rick said, certainly the reporting is there. We did a lot of slicing and dicing of the population within IBM to see what was going on with compensation programs, with various things. And what the business needed was the big picture of, you know, where is the money going? What's it doing for us? Depending on who was asking the question, they would have a very different perspective. So when we were reporting on some compensation programs, the business leader in Spain wanted to see, here's, you know, give it the data to me at the person level. The business leader in another bigger country might say, no, we need it, aggregate it much higher and we can do our analysis. Just depends on where you are. So it's really giving you the data, providing a tool that lets you see the answers to the business questions that you have.
That's great. And I think, Professor Mamun, I know you are educating the future generations on business intelligence and analytics. I believe you've done a lot of work in healthcare and finance. What are some of the applications that you see or emerging applications for business intelligence?
So thank you again, Ben and Rick, for inviting me and others to this webinar. Just quickly, since we are talking about the skills, right? I just want to make sure that both Rick and Patti were talking about two skills, business skills and I think the analytical skills. But one other part is called the technical skills. So where we're talking about the machines and those stuff too. And the applications are endless. I mean, we at the Sacred Heart University, we started with business analytics, then expanded to marketing analytics, financial analytics now. And in these applications, I mean, just think about marketing. And I know you guys know more marketing than me, definitely. But if you think about market segmentation or customer choice, everything is data, right? So the data comes in automatically, and getting those data, creating models and getting insights from the data. And then at the end of the day, as Patti was saying, someone at the business side will make a decision, right? And that's what I think the applications of the data with the business skills, technical skills, and analytical skills kind of combining together for a business and getting value for the company and for the customers.
So one way to, thank you, one way to push on this a little bit is, if you think about the existential question of why a business exists in the first place, you're trying to get a return on an investment. I mean, if we couldn't achieve a return greater than the stock market, why would we go to the trouble of starting a business, marketing? We just invest in the stock market and get our 6%, or maybe it's 1% this week, I don't know. But, and business intelligence, in my view, is helping a organization make better investment decisions. So with that lens, we're looking a little bit into the future. So here's my follow-up question. If business intelligence is really about trying to find a future path to get a return, what are some of the pieces that need to go into that to make those predictions? Rick, let me go back to you. How would you say that business intelligence gathers information to make predictions?
Sure. Well, I think part of it is capturing data sources at different levels. The example you gave from Target is capturing primary data, behavioral data, which is always the most powerful, which might be supplemented, which would have been a wise move here, with some third-party data or other data to find out that who's in the household and say, okay, we have a 50-year-old father and a 15-year-old daughter. We might want to cut that mailing off and use some external data. If I don't have that captured at Target, that to me would be a wise use of that. So look, the explosion of data, the explosion of big data, the explosion of what was servers, and that was great, and now cloud computing, that data is captured and kind of massaged and harnessed in one place. That's key and that's important. And you can really go on about what other data is out there. But then really it's applying other tools and technologies. There's certain tools for business intelligence. I go back to that definition. But from a practitioner, think of tools in the toolbox. We're going to have other things. We're going to have ways to build predictive models. And there's a myriad of choices out there that build logistic regression models, linear regression models, gradient boosting. You might have heard of neural networks, decision trees, random forests. These are all sort of choices that the person has. But Ben, in the shortest sense, what it's doing is it's rank ordering things. It's rank ordering, is someone likely to be pregnant? Is someone likely to respond to a direct offer? Is someone likely to be a good risk for credit or a bad risk for credit? Different data, X variables predicting that outcome. And then you move into what, I'll stop there, that's kind of answers your question, but then there's actually what you do with that, right? And it's not the stock market, it's making other marketing or business decisions off that and strategy.
I like where you're going about, I think you used the word about scenarios or different paths. One observation I have about marketing planning and business planning, is there's this interesting tension. We live in this world of chaos. I mean, we just came out of, we're not out of it yet, but pandemic, which these things happen in the external environment, which derail every best laid plan. But almost every marketing plan I've ever seen is completely linear. It's, we're going to spend $20 million and we're going to sell 100,000 widgets and everything's going to go perfectly. And I'm committing to that one path. And then of course it doesn't ever work. So where my follow-up to all of you is, part of this is planning for different scenarios and different probabilities. And Patti, maybe this is something you could talk to. I know you've done a lot of work at IBM, but how do you use business intelligence to game out different potential paths for an organization?
Okay, I'll talk about when I was on supporting the financial side of the company. So, working with the accountants and the financial planners, one of the things they needed to know, big picture, how many boxes can the factories make, and how many boxes can the salespeople sell? And you have to have those come together, because if you're making a zillion and you're selling a tiny amount, you not only you get no profit, you get a big loss, right? So there was a big vested interest in seeing the big picture and being able to figure out what kind of things should be incentivized for the salespeople. So this was a reporting application. So we used online analytical processing, OLAP. Used a tool to build that together. We got the data from the manufacturing side, the data from the sales side, and then there were formulas to use that the financial planners provided, along with the chart of accounts, boring accounting stuff, but really important. And it was different for each country, but you put the whole big picture together. And when you processed all that data, the calculations was surprising to me from a technical side, because I had been used to working on mainframe applications where you're dealing with tons of data and it takes X amount of time to do it. And we did this on a mid-range system because that's where the application worked, where the product worked, and it would take much, much longer to process all its data. But once the monthly processing was done, you could answer the business questions super fast because all of the math was already done. You had all of these subtotals along the way and the rolled up numbers and the whole thing. So then they could go and review this. So that's one way that we used the data and used business intelligence.
So Patti, you're touching on a really interesting issue too. You talk about boxes produced, boxes wanted. Professor Mamun, I know you've done a lot of work on market demand. If we segue a little bit into the marketing arena, one of the big challenges of marketing is trying to figure out or anticipate what is the market demand. What's the demand for the product, the price? Dr. Mamun, how would you approach forecasting market demand?
So as I think Rick touched on it a little bit, different types of modeling techniques that you use, right? And that's what we teach at the university, our program, that it's not unless just one modeling, is different modeling. And Rick talked about natural random forest, logistic regressions, right? The easiest one is obviously ordinary least squared OLS, right? So different modeling technique that we do. Let me give an example. Let's say Netflix, right? We all watch Netflix, but you will notice that they actually give you preferences of your demand, take your demand for shows and show it to you. Say that, do you want to watch this, right? And those are the data sets. They're actually collecting data as you're watching, right? As you're spending time. So when I go to my profile, I see my preferences kind of out there, in my profile. But if I go to my wife's profile, sometimes, right, I go and see lots of Korean drama because she watches Korean drama a lot, right? So here is the, prediction wise, you take this differently. There is the data collection. And once you get the data collection, you actually use some kind of modeling. Now, which model to pick is very important. So when we are doing forecasting, we actually have to do what in our discipline is called out of sample calculation. or out of sample forecasting. So we kind of divide the data and run the model in one part and then collect the forecast and then compare with the actual and forecast. So those out of sample experiments gives us a better understanding which data set or which modeling technique should work. We work on market demand. My students work on market demand for products, where a demand definitely depends on the price, competition price, income of the area, right? Those things. As well as we did a project on housing price, where not only it depends on the price of the neighborhood or income of the neighborhood, also the number of bathrooms, bathroom bedrooms, square footage, right? So again, I know that it's a long discussion, but in short, picking up the right model to collect the data and picking up the right model to get that business insight out of it is the main story here.
Thank you. And you're making me think of a funny challenge in translating the models. Our agency, Media Associates, we have a head of analytics that does marketing mix modeling, and he's working on a project right now for one of our clients, which is using statistical analysis to look at all the various interplay of different advertising channels and how does it affect the bottom of the funnel and drive sales. And we were on the call with a very, very smart client in their client-side analytics group. And he paused us and he said, could you do me a favor when you present this, can you make sure you transpose it into simple English so my senior leaders can understand what the heck we're doing? Which brings me to a question for you, Rick, which is part of the challenge here is all of you are smarter than me. And you guys are dealing with these models and regression trees, but you got to convince me or people above me, the CEO, to use this insight. How do you translate a very technical arcane field into something that can persuade executives to move?
I'll give you an example. A client of mine at a former company was in automotive services. Automotive services is where you go get your tires changed, new tires, oil, etc. We sit on all the data from the invoices. We go through a process, and we're going to spend some money on marketing. And the function is, well, who's likely to come in for an oil change? Who's a good prospect for an oil change? Well, guess what? It shouldn't be that hard to describe to a senior leader, because most senior leaders really don't care about the sub I, sub J's and all the techie aspect of what type of technique you used. Most are interested in it doesn't make sense. So how does it make sense? Well, if I just had an oil change last week, I'm probably not a good prospect for an oil change next week. If I had really high quality oil put in 3 months ago and my mileage was only 2,000 miles, I'm probably not a good target for an oil change. If I drive a Bugatti and somehow I end up in the database because I had a tire fix, I'm probably not a good prospect. So there are ways to really distill that data down where most people in the room, in my experience, and that type of example, nod their heads and go, that makes sense to me. Now, you could get into some of the details, but I find that you really, what I'd recommend in your example is that that's vetted by someone to say, whoa, like that might be too much for that senior leader to take on, because in my experience, there are standard ways to measure the effectiveness of a model. And most people, that's geek speak. The marketing guys aren't that interested in it. My experience.
You're raising a fantastic idea. I've never thought of this, but the analog on the classic marketing plan side, I'm sure everyone has seen a marketing plan that has personas, the audience persona. And the irony is, in an industry that prides ourselves on micro-targeting and understanding psychological nuance, we'll build marketing plans that have 3 photos of Jack, Sally, and Henry and the persona. But we do that for a reason. We're trying to take a complicated consumer research and boil it down into an iconic kind of representation that can get people to say, oh, I get where you're going with that idea. I think you're suggesting analytics needs the same.
Yeah, another thing on my example, just to keep running with it, is what I would do is I would say, here's the top 10% of people that are likely to respond. Let me look at the variables that are in the model and paint a picture of what they look like on average. On average, they had an oil change 6 months ago. On average, they live this far from the store. On average, they make this kind of income. Whatever. They drive a 7-year-old vehicle that has this many miles. Whatever the variables were, and then people in the room can look at that and say, that makes sense to me. So there's a way to pictorially display that, I think, depending on the, on the business challenge that you're tackling.
So Professor Mamun, you have a challenge. You're trying to educate a younger audience, and I assume college students aren't always rapidly paying attention. How do you communicate to maybe the most challenging audience? Some of your students may be there to get the grades and get the job and not really be into it. How do you translate and get people aboard these theories?
So we get two types of students, right? We serve the undergraduate students, right, who are there for the 4 years. They have other things going on there in their life on college campuses, right, as well as they're trying to get a grade, right? They're really not really thinking about a job until their senior year. So obviously that undergraduate population, they're driven by some majors, courses. So we go through those processes. And then we also have the graduate students, right? And this is where most of our students actually come from jobs, right? They actually have a few years of experience. They know the materials very well. They have well experienced in meetings and how the corporate world works. They come and they actually just want to know, in most cases, that cutting edge techniques. They at least want to understand it, so that when they go back and this junior fella comes and talks about these different techniques and stuff, so they would understand. In that in mind, for our graduate programs, they are always slowly build up the skills. So when you come to any programs at Sacred Heart, it will be like first 2 courses will be very introductory, and then it will build up the skills progression as you go with the courses. And usually we offer graduate certificates, which is like 4 courses, and then up to a full program. Yeah, and that's how the 2 different market here, right? Undergraduate and graduate, and we try to capture their attention different ways. That
I think what we're all circling around is we have to understand that there are different audiences we need to compel when we have insights, and that may take different communications. I want to shift gears a little bit. A lot of us are aware that we are in the midst of the Great Resignation. There's a huge tidal change in work right now, work from home. Employees are quitting in droves. People are starting new careers, and a lot of businesses are recruiting. We're hiring right now. We've been lucky to grow. It's very challenging. And Patti, you had, when we did some pre-conversations, you raised a good point that business intelligence is often very useful in human resources in applications. So I'd love to hear from you how BI works in improving organizational performance.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to think which of the stories do we like to hear now?
I think you were talking about a really interesting story about job openings and
oh, good. That was the one I was hoping.
Yeah.
Okay. So IBM, big giant corporation. It has job openings all the time, and got a resident population, of the employees who are already in place. So one of the projects I really enjoyed working on was a way to recommend jobs for internal candidates. This didn't mean that they would get the job. It didn't mean anything. What it meant was, as an employee, I could look at a curated list and see, oh, these are the jobs that I might want to look at and I might not have thought of. So what we did was we had data on file for the employees, things like their job title history and their salary band history, as well as their self-reported skills and proficiency and their location, like country. And then built a model to evaluate the history of the employee population over time and see what job titles and band levels progressed to what other job titles and band levels. So then you had an idea. Then apply that model against the employees that we have, the current employees, along with the data for the current job openings. And the job openings is the same stuff you'd see externally when you look at a company to say, look at our career section, the skills that are needed and the job title and well, maybe not the level, but internally we knew the level and that kind of thing. Marry them together and then come out with a curated list on an internal web page where an employee could go click on that page and see, for this week, here's 10 openings you might want to look at. And we did hear from people who said, I never thought of looking at that job title, but now I'm interested, because there's not one single career progression within a giant company.
You know what I love about that is I think a lot of us live in organizations where we have review processes, and people tend to be scored on some sort of 360 or something. But we often don't think that if someone is not working out well, maybe they're in the wrong position, they might perform better in a different position. Or if someone is a star, maybe we need to find a good opportunity for them, or that star will go fly to another constellation somewhere. So Patti, to follow up, is that something smaller organizations can do? It sounds complicated, but is that something an organization of 100 people or 50 people could try to pull off?
I don't know if it scales down quite that far,
Mhm.
because we used the history over years of the population, and I just so I'm not sure about how small one can go. What's the minimum size? But certainly it could be applied elsewhere. Just
So I
having
think
that data.
I think the and we're alluding to a very important issue, which is we've been talking a lot about theory and how powerful this is, but really everyone listening to this conversation right now is saying this all sounds good, unless I go hire Albert Einstein. How do I do this? How do I evolve my organization? Do I need to involve my technology or my software? So Rick, I want to start with you. I know you've done a lot of consulting in this. How do organizations that don't feel like they have their hands around this start moving in this direction?
Sure. Well, a couple things. I mean, clearly, the size of the organization somewhat matters. That your investment, your capital investment, can only be so far in certain areas. But I think one thing I'd look to would be, and it kind of goes back to the professor's comments about desire and aptitude. Some people are just built to do this kind of work. They're just, it's the way they think. Just like, I'm not a painter. There's a painting behind me. Someone else did it. Maybe I could be trained to be a painter, but what I find is that people sort of have that desire. Number one, they're hungry. They want to be able to do this work. And there's so much content out there today. But to bring it down to level, I mean, you know, I've been in startups where the question becomes, okay, who to hire? Where do we store our data? How do we capture this data? And a lot now with the like Google Cloud and Amazon, you can just port your data out there. You don't need to go out and buy hardware. And basically the way that works is you kind of pay by the drink. You know, you put the data up there and it's in the cloud, and then you hit it with different software offerings, whether it's Google BigQuery, you might have SQL, you might have, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But what I look to would be kind of right sizing and also avoiding the kind of shiny object thing. I give an example from my days at Subway where we needed to build some dashboards. We talked to companies such as Tableau and ClickView. A few of us got in the room and said, wait a minute, like, what are we doing this for? Why do we need those pretty pictures? Excel can create pretty pictures. We build a process in Excel. It meets the needs of the business. And just an asterisk on that, the reason for some of these companies like Tableau, like ClickView, like Domo and the like is maybe you have an organization where some people can't see all the data. So you need to build like security thing that you can't see this client or you can't see your colleagues' data. If that's the case, then clearly you need some sort of security in a sense. Where in our situation at Subway, what I'm referencing is some nice pretty bar charts by markets, and it was an audience of 20 internal folks that then would go out and use this data, within markets. So a bit of trust there to not like just give the tool to everybody. So I know that's a very general answer, but it's case by case really.
Well, one path that I've seen, and Professor Mamun, I'd be interested in your take, is sometimes it helps to begin with the ends in mind. The head of our analytics is a brilliant man named Jim Santa Barbara. He always approaches this saying, what are the questions we're trying to answer? And really clearly, logically think about what are we trying to answer? And if you focus that, you may find that you have data in-house that gives you a starting point. So the question I would frame for you, Professor Mamun, is what are some of the questions you see business intelligence best answering?
first of all, if you look at the questions about any company, they would like to make profit, right? So if you boil it down from there, and not only they're looking at, if you look at, come back to the products, what kind of services you need to provide, what are your clients? I think that will be a very important part for you to know. Knowing the market will be very important for you too. So those are I know that these are in general answers, but knowing your customers and knowing your market is more important. So that's how I'm gonna frame the questions for my students, right?
And a follow-up question is, I've observed one, it's not a trap, but I've seen this pattern in a lot of marketing plans. Sometimes marketers focus very internal. There'll be a product, they're enamored with a product, operations thinks they can do it. They don't look externally. And so a related question I would have, in Patti and Rick, feel free to jump in, is what are some of the external data sources that I should be thinking about as a marketer to help inform my forecasts or my decisions about where I go to market? Rick, you mentioned, I believe, that Target story would have been well suited if they had only appended a little bit of outside data to calibrate their thinking. Have you seen genres of external data that are very useful in marketing planning?
Oh, definitely. I think though, well, one area is what's your competition doing, to the extent you can get to that, right? Because that's key, especially in areas like consumer packaged goods. I'd say in some other businesses, if you look at what happened in the late 2009, 2010 with the whole crash, some of the external factors were, if you remember, lending was such that people were getting houses with no interest loans, and external data there would be nice to know, well, okay, what's this person really doing work-wise? What other credit offerings are out there? So what happened is, and I know this because I worked for Synchrony Financial, not at the time, but been out of there since then. But they were giving loans on a Lowe's credit card for $1,000 to somebody, or $1,500, based on what they knew about that person at that point in time. The person then went out and got a no interest loan on a home, and it's a whole house of cards. That whole thing was bundled up. So more data is always better. The challenge is there's cost to that data. So back to my automotive example, we had third-party data from a company called Axion, and we could append that to all the households, all the consumers. The question becomes, for the cost of using that data, does it improve your marketing decisioning, or does it just become a persona, right? Because I have all that transactional data. So behavioral data always beats sort of third-party data. And we give some examples, though, however, back to the Target example or back to this lending example, that sometimes some third-party data you really need to kind of say, whoa, time out, or that's the wrong decision to make.
Well, one trick I've learned to use to help, you can't test everything with data, is I'll do a workshop where I call it a pre-mortem. I got the idea from Daniel Kahneman, who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, behavioral economist. And the idea is, you say it's a year in the future and we failed miserably. What went wrong? And what you do is you have your team ideate, and usually they bubble up a couple of things that in the back of their mind have been like, was the website in position, or we didn't have the product inventory? And then you try to use BI to drill in on those pinch points. So it's an interesting little tactic.
Well, let me add to that, back to your example. All the data that Andrew Pohl used at Target at a point in time was based on what was happening kind of historically, then to look to predict is someone pregnant or not. But in some businesses, all of a sudden COVID happened. So all those X variables that predicted something. Now in that space, I think it would be less of a risk because pregnant women are going to still look for those products, right? Those were essential businesses. But I can tell you in this automotive services business, not everybody was looking, or if you're a restaurant, not everybody was looking to go out to eat dinner. So a lot of zeros started happening for people. Anyway, the whole situation changes.
But Rick, if I may jump into this one, but then you will see more demand for DoorDash or other type of services. Right?
Exactly.
So your data can point to you that this revenue stream is going down, but you can try to get the other revenue streams.
You do have to be careful of trends. I think there's a great line in Black Swan where they say, if you if you model a turkey's happiness with humans starting in January, it goes up and up and up and up until you get to November. There's just a drop off. I want to talk a little bit about a couple other issues, and then we'll open up for questions. Patti, we in an earlier call talked a little bit about misconceptions. And we've been talking about this wonderful world of business intelligence, and it can do all these magical things. But if I were to ask you, with your experience at IBM and elsewhere, what are some misconceptions about business intelligence? What would you say?
Well, one of the things that isn't obvious when you start out is you've got this great, the great tool of some sort. Is it a product that you're using, whatever? You can't just use the thing, even though, if you look at the market info about the product that you're going to use, it says you can do all these wonderful things. Well, you have to do the work to prepare your data to work with this tool. And you can't just say, here's a shiny thing that's going to answer all our questions magically. It's very customized what you're doing, and you need to understand your data. And in my case, it would be, someone comes and says, oh, we want to report on X. Mm-hmm. That's great. Do you want to report globally? Yes, we do. Okay, let's check which countries actually report on item X. And, only France sends that data. So that's not a good choice. But, we have these other data elements that most of the countries do report on. So we might want to shift the question over to that and, see if we can answer the business question. And identifying the data source, it's preparing the data for the tool. You can't just throw the tool at the data.
And Pat, you may be addressing the most important thing in this entire discussion, which is, I'm sure we've all been through this in our careers. When you bring a new technology in, there are two huge risks. One is, did you do the vetting to get the right thing and not overbuild? And two, what does your organization have to do to deploy that? And frankly, that's one of the most stressful things I've had in my career, because you're so busy doing your job, and then you're making this big bet on technology. Let me open this up. How do you vet technology, and how do you make sure your organization's in position? Rick, can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. Well, I've been in situations where you look at where you currently are today. It's a rubric to make these decisions, and what are some of the other options. You weigh the pros and cons of those options. What typically happens within that is it is a capital expenditure to buy software or to invest in some technology, but there's also a people component that you can't miss, and that's what Patti was just referencing. We do not yet have Siri for putting data together for analysis. Like, just tell me what should happen here. That doesn't exist. So there's still some hard work that has to happen, and a lot of it involves, people. And the other thing I caution folks on is I've worked for a software company. When the software people come in and start doing a demo and different things, that's all very protected right there. That's like, you got to watch, you got to be careful, and really, and I think it goes back to what are the business questions we're trying to answer here. That's very important as well. And then think about who you have on staff, because that people thing, we're not yet there. Now, what I will say is that we're seeing a democratization of many of these things, especially in machine learning happening. And I shared with one of the MA colleagues this infographic about all the companies that are out there. There's so many startups, that are doing this work, where some of it does become, I'm talking about machine learning, like building models. That's just one component of business intelligence and analytics, but it goes less from coding in certain software into more point and click. So we'll see more of that as time goes on. And maybe before I'm dead, maybe I'll be talking to the computer and just telling it what to do, and then everything will be a lot easier.
It is kind of a little bit there nowadays. Many statistical packages, the actual statistical programs, they have packages. But the danger of that is that people sometimes use those packages not knowing what they're doing, actually. They just put some data in, they just run the model, and then something comes out. I actually had we are having faculty coming in, doing their presentation to get a job at our university. And this faculty was present, this applicant was presenting this cool statistical package. And I was asking that, okay, what did it do? The package actually do, inside, what kind of model is happening there? And he could not answer it. So, I mean, and that's the danger I see more and more, that people don't understand what's going behind the package, but just doing it, and then, oh, well, I got a number here, right? As Patty said, it's just a tool, right? And I think Enrique is also saying other way around. My second thing is that you should invest on people more than the machines, I guess. That would be my.
And I would suggest that that's not a new problem. It's the same problem we've had forever. And that once you get something, that's physically working, you can ask it a question and get an answer, but you need the intelligence behind that to say, did I ask the right question? And does the answer make sense? So you can't just do it in a vacuum and say, use the lovely tool, but then you ask a question that doesn't make sense, and you get a response, but you need to understand.
I think, and Patty, I think you're talking about a very important issue. The logic, all of this is subject to some human interpretation. So I think it's really up to us to make sure we have the right logic. There's a wonderful story about a grocery chain that noticed that lemon yogurt sales were up. So they started to order more lemon yogurt, and lemon sales kept going up, and they ordered more lemon yogurt. And one day they did a qualitative survey, and they found out consumers were really mad because when they started this whole cycle, there was a shortage on vanilla, which was really what they wanted. And absent vanilla yogurt, lemon yogurt was the next best substitute. And they had tipped their entire yogurt section in the wrong direction. It's probably not true, but it's a wonderful story about pressure testing your logic. So last two questions, and we'll open it up. To bring this together, I think we all agree that this is absolutely an important field. And a lot of us are on our own paths to learn this. Two questions, the lightning round. How do we learn more as marketers? How can we start educating ourselves? And what steps should we take in an organization? Professor Mamun, how would I learn more as an adult marketer, and what should I take back to my organization on this issue?
I mean, Rick was alluding to a little bit. There are lots of free stuff out there, right? You can start there, definitely. I mean, of course, I would say come to my program, but definitely we have universities, colleges. They have short packages too that you can go and learn quickly. But again, free stuffs are there, Coursera, edX, there are lots of them. But you do need some kind of discussion with someone who can understand what you want and what you need, right? And kind of prescribe the package for you. So in that cases, someone experienced will be very helpful. I will let Rick or other people answer the second one, how the businesses will.
Rick, what would you say about how we can all learn and how we can take action in our organizations?
First, have desire, have a lot of desire, have some aptitude, and use Google and YouTube videos to go find what you want, what you're looking for. I mean, that's really one of the ways to do that. So for example, now I know you're talking that's more strategically, but I'm thinking about if someone wants to build a model to predict what Andrew Pohl did at Target, there's a standard process that goes around that. And it's about, machine learning and different things, right? And different tools and technologies. But go watch some videos. There's so much content out there that didn't exist in 1990 where you needed a book or you had to go talk to somebody. So as the professor was saying, Coursera, all those kind of organizations. Again, I'm thinking more from the builder folks versus, maybe the organization. But even anybody at any level can really study up on that. There's so much content out there.
Yeah, I would add to that when you figure out, oh, here's a couple of tools that I want to look at, and use Google or DuckDuckGo, whatever you like to use for your searches, go look at the company site. With the pandemic, a zillion conferences have gone online, and many of them are free. So, Tableau has a conference that is free. And then you see people presenting in half an hour, here's the great thing I did with this tool. Here's the problem I tried to solve. Here's how I did it. And I named Tableau, but the same applies to other products as well.
I would add, thank you all. My favorite book, I don't know if any of you are fans of Edward Tufte, but Edward Tufte,
Yeah.
I got him right here. Here's Edward Tufte. He wrote a book with the lovely title, The Visual Display of Quantitative Information. But he actually was one of the leading minds. He's still teaching this about how do you present data visually. And I think as marketers, we've all been in PowerPoint and Excel and tried to figure out how do we paint a story. Best $45 you'll spend, no affiliation with us, but Edward Tufte, Tufte, wonderful books. So I would love to open it up to questions. And let me see here. Feel free to type it into the bar if we have any questions from the audience, or feel free to jump in. I think one of the things that popped up in the comments is there's some interest in how you do data visualization, interactive analytics, how you present data. Any best practices any of you have seen? You mentioned Tableau, Patty. Are there certain resources out there?
I would say simple is the best. Not try to make it complicated. I once went to this 3D data visualization. You actually wear goggle, thing, and they are trying to explain how you can take like 7 indicators into one graph, because usually on a paper you can just have 2 dimension, right? So they were trying to get 7 dimension with a graphical presentation of a forest, and I got lost. I said, I don't see anything here. It's like big mushy forest for me, right? And I'm a statistics person. Right. So, and think about presenting that to, someone who doesn't have a statistical background, but the decision maker. Right. So I would say simple is always the best. That will be my answer, I guess, on that one.
Yeah, I'm thinking about presentations that we did internally, and it was, definitely there were some graphs and, charts and things, but they weren't all that complicated. They were telling the stories in a straightforward way. The basic presentation stuff that you all know already, which is you want to tell a story, and when you read from this page to this page of your presentation, they should be coordinated in some way that I led from here to there. Keep the big picture in mind, show the analysis that needs to be shown. You're not going to get into you might say we were dealing with X number of employees, right? But you're not going to get into in this part of the company, in this country, here's all this extra data that's behind the scenes and available if someone needs it, but keep it simple. I like
one of my favorite presenters is Mary Meeker. She's been famous for years with her future media, internet technology forecasts. And if you Google Mary Meeker and look at her PowerPoint predictions, you can read her PowerPoint and she tells a story. If you just read the headlines, it's like you're reading a very lucid, clear argument with a narrative arc with lots of charts and tables. But one trick I tell my team is, read your presentation, just the headlines, and are you telling a clean, clear story? And that kind of brings sometimes, focus. Lightning round, any final thoughts from the team? Rick, let me jump with you. The future of BI, what's your prediction?
Well, I kind of touched on it. I think technology is going to take us into an area. I think, though, that part of the challenge is, even with the technology, is this movement from with big data and rapidity. So you said early on about programs they're kind of static in time and not linear. So this sort of, what's the right message to the customer at that point in time? And does that feel right to me as a customer, right? Is that the right offer? Those kind of things. And I can tell you companies are putting a lot of energy towards this, like CVS. So it's not just enough to mail someone, but like what should be in the offer? When should that person get it? And just think of all like time and marketing and all that kind of tripping on each other. That's a pretty heady problem that we'll see. So it's not, I do this marketing campaign now, I have some media, I have this, and how did it do? It's sort of the interconnectedness of that with tools and technology and data. That's where it gets crazy, because there's not enough it's hard. It becomes hard work because as humans, and this is what, you know, I'll just do a little commercial here at Khawaja Health. It's one of the things that some businesses I think have been more mature with applying this. I'd go back in time to financial services, credit cards, very mature, retailers, catalogers, got into consumer packaged goods. Now we're seeing in other businesses that are less mature and nascent in their use of analytics and business intelligence. And I'm not saying pharma is that, but they are kind of, you know, there's a lot of data and it's prescriptions and, you know, interactions with websites. I mean, there's a lot of data that's coming together to kind of set a different trajectory for client outcomes.
Professor Mamun, your prediction for the future of BI. What do you think the future is?
More and more companies are going to start using data, right? So there's no doubt about that. I think what will going to happen also looking at the data's ethical use of data and privacy, those things will be more important coming forward. And the big area will be data security. And it will be more and more important, if not the important thing's going to be in next decade. So that's something really important in my mind to teach students not only the use of data, ethical use of data, also the data security and privacy. And I think that always last part will be the human component of using. Other way of saying the market fundamentals doesn't change. Doesn't matter whether you use more data or not, right? So the human component of your marketing tools, they will be same. It's just you have one more tool in your toolbox to figure that out.
Great. And last but not least, Patti, any final predictions for the future of business intelligence?
I think it gets both easier and more complicated as time goes on because the tools get easier to use, but you need to have the thinking behind it. One of the things that Professor Mamun said just triggered something for me, and that was the data security, the privacy, the ethical part. If you build a model based on history, your predictions are going to continue along the same line. And if what you were doing before wasn't, I'm not going to say ethical, wasn't fair in some way, you're going to carry on the unfairness of whatever that thing was. You know, are women getting the promotions, for example? Well, if historically the women were not getting the promotions, and then you say, okay, let's analyze the population this way. And by the way, we did not analyze male, female. I'm just using this as an example. That was one of the protected data elements that you did not use unless you had a very specific reason for doing it and authorization to use it. And we would not use it in the programs that we were doing. But if that were the case, you build your model and you say, oh, okay, now these are the people who should get promoted. And it turns out they're all male because historically that's who got promoted. Then you're propagating the behavior that you might not wish to propagate.
And you know, that's a great, very important point, I think, to end this conversation on is part of marketing is realizing that if we do target people, we exclude others. If we move the market, we're shifting culture. And I think we can all agree that we're entering an area where diversity and inclusion and sensitivity are important. So all of our data approaches need to be calibrated accordingly. So listen, I want to thank the team. You have been wonderful. This is a complicated topic. I understood about half of what you all said, but thank you very much for your time. So again, our panelists tonight, we had Professor Khawaja Mamun. Thank you very much. She's with Sacred Heart University, fantastic programs there. Patti McCabe, formerly of IBM, who is currently seeking a business analyst role. And Rick Muldowney, who is Vice President of Advanced Analytics at Khawaja Health, finally fixing our healthcare system. And I'm Ben Coons, EVP at Media Associates. Finally, everyone mark your calendars. We have 2 exciting events coming up after the holidays. On Thursday, January 13th, location TBD, we will be having an in-person open bar networking event, New Year, New Marketer, New You. We invite you to come out on January 13th and actually meet some of us in person. It's going to be a great event. It'll probably be in the Stanford area. We'll send an email out with a location. And following that, on February 10th, we have our annual Super Bowl ad preview, one of the best events of the year. You won't want to miss that one either. So thank you all, and I'll turn it back to Richard for a recap.
All right. Well, thank you, Ben. Thank you to our panelists, and really just want to wrap up by saying thank you to all of the attendees for joining us tonight. Really happy to have you here. This session was recorded, so if you want to revisit any part of this, you'll be able to do so in the coming days. And as Ben said, we have really exciting events coming up in person at the beginning of the calendar year. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.